On April 12th, 2020, Easter Sunday, the Prime Minister released this video statement to the press.
I've today left hospital after a week in which the NHS has saved my life. No question.
On May 2nd, 2020, following an exclusive interview with the Prime Minister, The Sun on Sunday's political editor, David Wooding, reported that Boris Johnson reveals doctors prepared to announce his death as he battled coronavirus. This story was picked up by The Times, Evening Standard, ITV, Metro, CNBC, NBC, Politico, India Today, Times of Israel, and many others. This is how ABC News covered it.
Tonight, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson revealing just how close he came to dying from coronavirus. He says his doctors were preparing how to announce his death while he was in the ICU.
This video was released via the Evening Standard's YouTube channel. And this is how David Wooding followed up on his interview via Good Morning Britain.
I mean, that was jaw-dropping, reading that. And it must have been for you as well, sitting with a man who tells you that those around him were preparing for his death.
He used the word presentational to me. They were discussing how to present it in the event that things got very much worse. And I said to him, what, in the event you were put on a ventilator? And he said, no, much, much worse than that. And then said that they were planning a death of Stalin scenario, obviously referring to the way that people reacted after the death of Stalin and the moves taken to inform the nation of his demise.
David Wooding has told me he has recorded proof that his story is a fair and accurate account of the interview, and that neither Mr. Johnson nor any of his team have ever complained about the accuracy of the story. He has also shown me evidence that Mr. Johnson did claim that it was the doctors who had the plans, not a communications team. He told me that Number 10 would always let him know when they were unhappy about an article, but they made no objections following that interview, and they gave him another exclusive interview afterwards. More recently, I also gave the Prime Minister and his communications chief, Mr. Guto Harry, 2 opportunities to correct the claim that his doctors had prepared to announce his death from COVID-19. They provided no response. As recently as January 31st of 2022, Pippa Crerar of The Mirror reported that Boris Johnson had told Conservative Party colleagues at a 1922 committee meeting that he had nearly died of COVID. The claims made by Mr. Johnson over the last 2 years have been very effective.
You know, the Prime Minister had literally nearly just died.
We need to remember again, and I keep saying it, Boris Johnson nearly died.
This is a Prime Minister who nearly died.
Back in 2020, even I tweeted out 2 supportive messages for Mr. Johnson, including this one. I hope Boris Johnson makes a 100% full recovery during this difficult time. He'll get through this, and so will the UK. There were strange inconsistencies within the reporting of Mr. Johnson's condition. For example, doctors I've spoken to told me that for a doctor to be anywhere near being ready to announce a COVID patient's death, the patient would usually have to be 1. Struggling to breathe. Sky News' Beth Rigby reported that Mr. Johnson was struggling to breathe. But post leaving hospital, Mr. Johnson himself told The Sun on Sunday that I wasn't struggling to breathe. 2. Require a lot of oxygen. The Times reported that he had been given 4 litres of oxygen, meaning per minute, in intensive care. But they also stated that the normal threshold for intensive care is 15 litres, suggesting that he was in better health than such patients generally. An ITU consultant who works with COVID patients told me that reports that he was given just 4 litres of oxygen must be mistaken. If not, we've all been made to make an enormous fuss about what essentially amounts to gentle, early-stage oxygen support. 3. Be taken to the ICU. Mr. Johnson was taken to the ICU, but the BBC's Laura Kunsberg, following a Number 10 briefing, reported that the PM has been moved to intensive care as a precaution in case he needs ventilation to get through his illness. 4. Need ventilation. Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab stated that Johnson was receiving standard oxygen treatment and breathing without any assistance. He has not required mechanical ventilation or non-invasive respiratory support, CPAP. After the PM had been moved out of the ICU, it was reported that his official spokesman had confirmed that this hadn't changed. The ITU consultant I spoke to told me the claim that his medical team thought that his condition was severe enough to prepare to announce his death, but not severe enough for him even to require CPAP, is an oxymoron. 5. Be flat on their back or front, unable to communicate, potentially not even conscious. But The Guardian reported that Rishi Sunak, Chancellor of the Exchequer, said the Prime Minister was sitting up in bed and engaging positively with medical staff whilst in intensive care. 6. Have had COVID pneumonia. But Sky News reported that we're told from Downing Street that Boris Johnson doesn't have pneumonia.
Somebody didn't tell the truth about Boris Johnson's illness.
First off, doctor-patient confidentiality is a vital cornerstone of the medical profession. And if a medical practitioner who treated the Prime Minister were to release details of his care that weren't in the public domain, they could, if a whistleblower argument failed in court, be fired for that and never be able to practice again, be sued or worse. This is why we cannot and should not blame any NHS staff for not revealing this stuff sooner. However, what is not widely understood is that there are exceptions. One of the backers of Stop Lying in Politics, Mr. Hugh Brown, pointed out the following. The Information Commissioner's Office guidance makes clear that special category data includes health data. The conditions for processing special category data are highly restrictive unless you can prove that the processing relates to personal data which has clearly been made public by the individual concerned. So, when Boris Johnson made claims about his healthcare in the public domain, those specific claims lost their status as confidential health data, which, very long story short, means that anyone can FOI request details of Mr. Johnson's healthcare on the specific claims that he's made public. Pause for a minute and let that settle into your understanding. Got it? Good. You're now more aware than Boris Johnson was on this issue. Even St. Thomas's Hospital didn't understand it for over a year. They only really got it after the ICO agreed with me that I could make such a request. It's obviously much more complicated than this, but that's the basics. After a lot of work, we realised that the story from The Sun that Boris Johnson reveals doctors prepared to announce his death as he battled coronavirus was the best option to focus on. This was because if these preparations to announce his death existed, the hospital would surely have proof of them within their records. So we asked St. Thomas's Hospital to please provide any information your hospital holds concerning any preparations or strategy or contingency plans or any relevant materials of a different name that were specifically created to announce the potential event of the Prime Minister's death from COVID-19 in 2020. When St. Thomas's Hospital responded, their response was written and signed off by the Chief Operating Officer of the entire hospital, Mr. John Findlay. I have never heard of a C-level executive responding to an FOI request before this investigation. It occurred to me that such a move demonstrated the credibility that St. Thomas's Hospital wanted to associate with my request and their response. We must remember that Mr. Findlay had the Information Commissioner's Office, who police FOI responses, breathing down his neck at my request. If his hospital's records held any recorded preparations at all to announce Mr. Johnson's death, he was legally required to acknowledge that said preparations existed at the very least. His response was short and to the point. The Trust does not hold the information requested. There was absolutely no evidence within Boris Johnson's health records, his nurses' notes, doctors' emails, or any other records within the hospital that his doctors had made any preparations or strategy or contingency plans to announce his death. So, what does all of this mean? Get this. Before the Prime Minister found out about our investigation, this was the kind of language he was using to describe the severity of his COVID-19 condition.
The NHS has saved my life, no question.
The doctors had all sorts of plans for what to do if things went badly wrong, and they were going to have to deal with a death of Stalin type scenario. I nearly died. He also never complained about or contradicted the Sun's claim that Boris Johnson reveals doctors prepared to announce his death as he battled coronavirus. The message the Prime Minister wanted the world to receive and believe was clear. However, after we had informed the Prime Minister of this investigation, and after we had been told that Mr. Johnson knew St. Thomas's Hospital had gone on the record that they held no evidence of any preparations to announce his death, the language he used to describe his battle with COVID changed completely.
How bad did things get?
Well, I've got to be absolutely clear that whatever happened to me was really mild by comparison with the experience of so many other people, so many thousands of other people in this country.
That is what PR people would call a complete communications U-turn. From saved my life, no question, to really mild. From the doctors had all sorts of plans for what to do if things went badly wrong and they were going to have to deal with a death of Stalin type scenario, to really mild. From I nearly died to really mild. From Boris Johnson reveals doctors prepared to announce his death as he battled coronavirus, to really mild. I believe that after he found out that we knew, he panicked and U-turned, thinking it would save him by killing my story. But it didn't. His complete contradiction of his previous claims achieved the opposite instead.